Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
An interception by the Eagles. They've got him again. They've got him back at the 26. He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
All right. What's up? What's up? Welcome one, welcome all to episode 210 of Flipping the Birds. As you can tell, the inmates are running the asylum. It's myself, Zach Chavalella, and Eric Reese here today, filling in for the rest of the crew. And we're here to talk some OTA. So, Eric, you excited to talk a little Eagles football today?
I'm always excited to talk about Eagles football. It's kind of like how in the Slack chat, I've been really excited to talk about Sixers basketball. No, definitely a lot more excited to talk Eagles football. Flyers hockey, as always. You can always sidebar me whenever at Eric Reese FN. But, dude, let's hop into this because this upcoming season is just nothing but excitement as far as the Philadelphia Eagles are concerned.
Yeah, absolutely true. So, draft came and went. A lot of big improvements to the defensive side of the ball, just kind of how I think we all expected it to go. And then now it comes down to, well, here's OTAs. You know, let's get a read on some of these guys, kind of figure out where some players are in relation to where they were last year, maybe how some of the lower level guys are coming up. You know, there's some gaps to fill, some of the rookies that are now in place to potentially take on a role. And, you know, I guess really that's where we start is when we look at some of these holes. You know, is there anyone defensively that, you know, you see being able to seize an opportunity here to kind of really just step up and assert themselves a little bit?
You know, I look at some of these players, and not necessarily ones who will be jumping off the page as a starter. And one that jumps off the page to me is Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith, I think the kind of the verdict here is we don't know what we have. It's pretty much just like Nakobe Dean. We don't know what we have. There's a lot of question marks there. So as far as quote unquote non-starters, like somebody that, you know, quite frankly is a rotation piece, maybe, I'm focused on Nolan Smith this year and what he can contribute to the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, that defensive line is going to be so key. I think everyone's going to really be watching Nolan Smith because after the Hassan Reddick trade, you know, who do you look to? You know, that's kind of the next man up. So obviously they're going to be looking a lot at new addition Bryce Huff. But when you talk about that kind of outside, you know, fifth linebacker, that's where Nolan Smith really was supposed to be the heir apparent to Hassan Reddick. And now it's going to be time to see if he himself, you know, really can take up that position. We got Ron here in the chat. What's up, Ron? What's going on? What's going on, everyone out there? Why don't you hit us up with the people you're looking to watch defensively, these OTAs, to see who can step up, who's someone that you really want to see step up and take a more, let's say, featured role with this team this season. For me, I got to keep it on the defensive line as well. You know that I'm a Marlon Tuipulotu guy. Absolutely ride or die, 100%. This is a big opportunity for him to step up and really just kind of hold down the fort in that depth unit and maintain a spot in that rotation, right, for that defensive line. Going up against him, though, undrafted free agent Gabe Hall, who is one hell of a prospect. So that's going to be a kind of position battle that I'm going to be watching a lot just to see, you know, which one of these guys can really kind of step up into that fourth DT role because – and it's crazy that we're talking about a fourth defensive tackle role as a position of battle to watch, but that's how deep this team goes. Is how they use their rotations, and they even rotate some of these guys outside of that normalized positioning as well. You know, we're probably going to be looking at a little bit of 52, a little bit of 43 at times defensively, and a little bit of 34 as well. So you're going to be having guys who are kind of moving all around that defensive line, and theoretically, because of the athletic profile that some of these guys have, guys like Jalen Carter, guys like Milton Williams, you can look at 3D tackles on the field at one time and not just a run, you know, a goal line or a run stop situation. So definitely a lot of possibilities there, but for sure, I got to keep an eye on Marlon Tuipulotu because this is it. This is the breakout year. I'm absolutely feeling it.
Yeah, as far as a breakout year is concerned, and I know Morgan would be all over it to kind of bring him up, but Milton Williams. Milton Williams is somebody that he's impressive as an athlete getting off the line. He's explosive. He has a lot of power, and he has the opportunity this year to just break out in a big way. But I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. What I said earlier about kind of just with Nolan Smith and seeing what he can do pretty much off the line, because we're kind of going by what Fangio does. Fangio likes to take those linebackers that would otherwise rush, as we saw with Hassan Reddick before, and kind of drop them back. So we'll see how much of that works. I kind of hope that's not the commitment all year long. I hope they're smart with it, and they you see more not blitzes as compared to last year from that role, because I just didn't understand what they were doing with Hassan Reddick last year. And if you're not going to accentuate the positives and the strengths of these players, then it's just a mismanagement. So you got to use them the right way, and that means Philadelphia is just going to be full of hell with putting pressure on quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think I kind of have a little bit of faith in Vic Fangio, and I think the city's kind of rallied around Fangio as of late. But or I guess really even since the hire, you got to give credit to Eagles fans. But you may be looking at times where you see a guy like Nolan Smith drop back. I think he's more likely to drop back than a Josh Sweat, a Bryce Huff. But at the same time, he's going to get his opportunities to rush. He's not just going to be like a pure coverage back. They're not running like a classic 43 where he's going to be out there alongside Devin White and the Kobe Dean. Just, you're effectively looking at a middle linebacker, a weak and strong. You're not necessarily looking at that same kind of traditional formation. You're probably looking at a lot more moving parts. And so, maybe sometimes he'll rush from the outside. Maybe sometimes he'll sneak on inside, kind of rush down the middle in kind of a blitzing package. And yeah, he's going to drop into coverage as well, but I think he's a little bit better suited for that than Hassan Reddick was. So I don't want him doing that every time, but we're gonna see and see what it looks like. But you talked about utilizing players to the best of their ability. Ron brings up a good guy that we got to mention. That's Jordan Davis, right? So Jordan Davis did not have the year that he wanted to, the year that the Eagles wanted him to last year. The big prevailing word out of the behind the scenes was that he just wasn't in the best shape, and that very well could be. And this is probably, I want to phrase this in a way where people don't jump off the ship, because we're talking about a first round defensive tackle that was taken ahead of a star safety. People are having flashbacks back to Earl Thomas and Brandon Graham. But when you look at Jordan Davis, does he have to get in better shape? Absolutely, 100%.
By the way, just want to cut you off before you make that point. The Earl Thomas and Brandon Graham thing didn't exactly work out the worst, but obviously when you go in hindsight, it's like you probably got more mileage out of an Earl Thomas, Legion of Boom versus you can compare, but honestly, it's not as bad at the end of the day.
No, I fully agree. I mean, when you go peak for peak, like obviously Thomas comes out top of that, but look at the longevity that you've had with Brandon Graham, and not only that, but the leadership that he's provided to your locker room as well. I think that's something that you definitely have to keep in mind. Now, is Jordan Davis the leader, in his third year that Brandon Graham was, that Brandon Graham is today? Like, no, but that's the kind of thing where you have to let the long game play out a little bit. But for now, he does have to improve his shape. He does have to improve his production. And I do think having Vic Fangio and the way that they're setting up this team is actually going to work in favor for Davis, because he can play a little bit more of that zero tech, a little bit more of that nose tackle, kind of get right up in front, get right over that center, overpower him, maul him. And I think you're going to be looking at a guy who's going to be a little bit more productive in the run game and the pass game. Like the pass game would be a huge bonus, but the main focus is the run game. Last season, the whole D-line really struggled with that, and the linebacking core obviously as well. But now that the team hopefully will be working a little bit better as a cohesive unit, another year hopefully again in better shape for Jordan Davis, I think we're looking at a better run stuffing team. How do you feel about the team's run defense?
I agree, especially in the middle there. I do think kind of to alleviate Jordan Davis a little bit, that you do have a little bit of depth for a rotation. I mean, you got Marlon there to, pretty much trade in and out with the Jalen Carter, and that's going to complement Jordan Davis. So if Jordan Davis is getting doubled, he can almost not allow himself I guess that'll be the bad way to put it, but like not really allow himself to be doubled, but it's like no real, a big thing, because if you look at the defensive line, there is so much more depth to give somebody a rest this year than last year. It's not even comparable. So I mean, is that like an excuse for Jordan Davis, to come in to camp and say, hey, maybe I can get away with this? Absolutely not. Don't have that in your head that you feel that you can get away with anything. But if you push and push and push, now you got like I don't know, three players that stack the middle, especially with a rushing defense there. I thought the rushing defense was pretty solid last year until it kind of broke down towards the end of the season, but everything broke down towards the end of the season anyway. I really just believe that there's a lot more direction with these players this year as far as the coordinators are concerned, and you're going to see that translate on the field and just how they're used, and that's going to dictate a lot of what you see from the production of these guys on the defensive line. Davis, I believe, is going to be in better shape if that's the kind of the signal on him right now. But alongside of that, like I look at again Carter, Marlon. I even look at guys like Gabe Hall. Like Gabe Hall is somebody who's way down the depth chart as a defensive end, but I think that that's not accurate. I think that he's going to be a guy that, maybe doesn't get a ton of snaps and in percentage doesn't leap off the paper, but he's going to have impactful moments. I don't think he's, somebody to just kind of say, oh, he's on the roster and then stop your, discussion there.
Well, Gabe Hall, for me, I think he's a pusher. That's kind of what I got into when I wanted to see, who's, got to step up, and looking at Marlon Tuipulotu, like he's there to push Tuipulotu. He's there to push some of these other guys as well. Even I'd say push Milton Williams, because I don't want to say no one's job is safe in this and that, but it's football, man. Like, nothing given, everything earned, so that's going to be one big thing to watch for the whole unit. Cause you have, we talked about the holes the team came into from the offseason. You have linebacking positions that aren't solidified. We think that it's going to be Devin White and Nakobe Dean going into the year.
Right.
We don't know that yet for sure. You talk about the outside cornerback battle. Well, we just got 2 first-round quality players drafted that, are supposedly going to have snaps at the outside corner. So, how's that necessarily going to work with Darius Slay and James Bradbury? We'll touch on that a little bit later. And then, of course, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Avonte Maddox, they're back in Eagles green. So there's going to be, there's going to be a lot of that opportunity to push some guys, from some of those lower level players like a Gabe Hall. So I definitely don't think that he's anyone to sleep on. I think he's somebody who is definitely going to have, his fair share of snaps, his fair share of opportunities there. But, really someone who I think can kind of move this defensive line and kind of light a fire under the asses of some of these guys, which I think you kind of need. And I want to move on to the linebackers, kind of go, D-line and work our way up. But before we get to that, I do just want to, say one quick thing. When you talk about a player getting in shape, the onus for something like that, first and foremost, always on the player. I think we can all agree on that. The first responsibility, absolutely on the player. That being said, there is a sense of responsibility that has to be on the coaches to get through to a player, to get them to that point where they're going to commit to their body. Now, there's players that you just can't reach. Sometimes maybe that's Jordan Davis. I don't know that yet. I hope that's not the case. So we got to see what this coaching staff does. I think there were enough question marks about the coaching staff that we saw last year. And, you talk about the drop off that the team saw. Part of that was, playing better teams towards the end of the year. Part of that was going to Matt Patricia, which I think was a horrendous idea. And for as fugazi as the team seemed in the first half, they were worse for hiring Matt Patricia in the second. So, that's my thought there.
Yeah, I never understood bringing in Matt Patricia, especially when you consider the the history when there was Slay as well. Um, and for what it's worth, you don't go out of your way with a bad defensive coordinator and say, "Hey, let's bring in something that we know also doesn't work." By that point, man, just let the side finish it out and then just kick him out the door. Where was the harm
Yeah.
there at the end
I
of the
mean, you're
day?
just welcoming in controversy at that point,
Right.
when you make a change like that midseason and like let's say that they brought in Vic Fangio to play that Patricia role earlier in the season, and then you move on to Fangio. I still don't love it just because schematically he's so different, even though Desai is supposed to be that disciple,
Right.
just because a guy's under another guy's coaching tree doesn't mean that he implements everything the same way. Like that's the one thing that I feel like people overestimate in coaching trees. So like we expect this defense to look different this year, right? Even though it's going from Desai to Fangio. So my whole point with that, I'm kind of rambling on it now, but is just to say that just making that mid-year transition is always difficult. But Matt Patricia was also like the worst possible guy that you could have done that mid-year transition with. So that's all in the past now. We're future focused. We're looking at next season for the Eagles. And I'm feeling pretty good under Vic Fangio so far. But again, still some question marks. One of the question mark areas we talked about this linebacking core. Do you have an expectation, or is rather, I guess if we're focusing on OTAs, Eric, who are you hoping to see kind of shine out of this linebacking core in these OTAs?
So technically, he is going to be listed as a linebacker on the depth chart, but I want to see what about Jalen Hunt. He's somebody that we drafted, obviously this year, and it's somebody that we're going to put, in that same kind of position to again relentlessly rush quarterbacks. But and by the way, just getting away from Nakobe Dean because I think I've hounded that sentiment, over so many episodes here. We all know exactly what I'm gonna get at. What is he? Can he stay healthy? Yada yada yada. But the shiny toy, it has to be Jeremiah Trotter Jr., right? Like
Yeah.
I'm focused on like there's less and less games, less and less activity in a preseason. That has me ready to see what about him because so many polarizing opinions. He's a Philadelphia legacy product of Jeremiah Trotter Sr. And he comes to, obviously the team's a great story. And then you have so many, people who are, let's say, draft whizzes in quotes, because everybody says they know everything. And then it's before they even step on the field. We don't know anything.
I don't
would
think
like
Mel
to see
Kiper's
what
gotten
about
a draft pick right in 30 years. I just want to put that out there real quick.
And here's the deal. He gets paid to be wrong. And the people who are on Twitter are wrong for free. So what does it matter? I want to see what he can do on the field. And then, if he ends up being somebody who plays well outside of his forecast, if you will, then to me, I think I almost expected that. But I also have like a heart full. I'm like, man, it would have been cool to have Trotter. Well, now that we have him, awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see what about it again. But I will say that there is a name here because I do look at like Devin White. I'm like, okay, like is he going to be able to last throughout the
Yeah.
season? I look at Nakobe Dean. Is he going to stay healthy? And then I think Brian over there brought up a name, Zach Bond, and then Ben Van Summerin. I think I'm saying that right. No, I'm not Summerin. Anyway, those two, I just want to see what they can do as well. And I believe at the end of the day, maybe they could be solid players, but they're not going to show it this year. They're going to be special teamers.
Yeah, I'll talk about Zach Bond first since Brian was, so kind enough. And of course, folks, Brian from Flipping the Birds, fame for many, many years. And of course, you saw his silhouette just about 5 minutes ago.
Never met him.
Never met the guy. Hopefully we never do. But he brought up Zach Bond and, someone who I think he came in like a nice depth piece. He kind of has that Band-Aid feel to him a little bit. Based on what I've been hearing, he's taken on a bit more of a center focused role than expected, right? So I think the incumbent favor to start has to be Devin White, just off of the amount they're paying him, based off of what he's done in the league. But you're more than likely looking for two main guys. You get a point, Eric?
Just real quick, man. Like I'm gonna remind you of your point because I'll remember it. But I hate, dude, the idea across sports. It's like, man, well, what we're paying this guy, so we have to start him. Dude, if he sucks, he sucks. Like I'm
Sure.
that just the
No,
cap is
and
what it is. Get him off the field. If he sucks, he sucks. Anyway, go back to your point.
yeah, as a Sixers beat reporter, that definitely speaks to my soul.
Right.
But what I will say is, like there's a time to have that conversation. When you're coming into OTAs, I think it's fair to have that expectation of performance relative to pay scale, right? Now, if you are like getting close to the regular season and you're like, all right, well, this dude who we now have, and even though we're paying him a ton of money, we know he sucks. That's when you're like, all right, we'll bench his ass. Like James Bradbury, we saw last season. So unless he comes out and he looks like the James Bradbury of 2 years ago, like he's playing from a leg down essentially, right? Devin White and Zach Bond, they're kind of coming in with a bit more leeway in that sense. It kind of works both good and bad because you don't have the favor already chalked up, already earned, but at the same time, you don't have that kind of bad press when you're coming into the position either. So all that just to say that Zach Bond has been a bit more highly regarded than I would have anticipated. And I think I've heard that they're playing him a bit more at that traditional middle linebacker role, which
Right.
was not my expectation for him because he's more of a pass rusher, according to, what I've, mostly read from other accounts, but also the Saints games that I've watched. It seems like he's better
an
suited.
left inside linebacker technically. So yeah, I would expect him clearly from what that sounds like to be rushing from the left side.
Yeah,
I guess,
the thing.
Yeah, the weak side. So
I don't know how much he'll be in coverage is the thing. I think they try to use him in coverage, in New Orleans a lot. And, from what I heard, they kind of played him out of position and it didn't really work that well. So, I don't know. We'll see. I kind of expected him to fall into that outside linebacker category, like that Jalix Hunt, like a Nolan Smith, guys that we talked about there. But I'm very curious to see, and I trust Philadelphia's coaching and especially now that Vic Fangio is in place here, and I trust the organization to the point where on a Band-Aid flyer guy, like, yeah, sure, go ahead and let's see what he looks like on the inside. And I do want to see what it actually looks like when we get a little bit closer to the preseason and see what he looks like there. But you talked about Jalix Hunt. I love Jalix Hunt, man. I was ecstatic when they drafted him. I wasn't one of those guys talking about how high they drafted him and all that because dude's a monster. Like, I get it. He played at the smallest of small schools. 100%. Totally get it. Do not care. Like, this is like we're talking about effectively a fourth round pick because it was like a comp third, I believe it ended up being, or right around that position. So it's not a top what would that be, 96 pick or even a top 90 pick, we'll say, because we're talking tail end of the third is the point. So with that being said, like you're not having a premium asset investment into this guy, but I think he's deserving of it because when you look at that athletic profile, you're talking about a guy who, if he played at a bigger school, you're talking about a guy who could have possibly gone to the first round.
Dude,
like that's his athletic profile.
That's the other thing that I hate. You want to talk about the two biggest pet peeves is we've invested so much money in this guy that we can't bench him in. We can't draft this guy. He came from a small school. My alma mater is the University of Delaware, and I can name like
the Blue Hens,
Rich Gannon, Joe Flacco, Adderley. There's good players that have come from there, and some of those are recent. Some of those are they were in the Super Bowl in 2002, so at least from the 2000s and forward. But those, like, dude, you can go to Narnia for all I care. If you are fine as a football player, and by the way, if you get paid $10 versus the guy that gets paid $10 million, I'm going to start the $10 guy from Narnia. What are we're trying to win, or are we trying to, just have, names on a roster? If we're trying to have names on a roster, then welcome to the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants.
Yeah, and the Eagles going on their little Bama trip, that they did have success doing that. I get it.
Right
Georgia
after I
trip.
say the small school rant, you go to Bama.
Well, no, but hear me out. Like, but then they went
you.
on the Georgia trip and they had a little bit of success there. But the Georgia trip, I get it. They're all still young, but I think people are a little bit lowered on that that bandwagon now. A couple years, and the Kobe Dean still hasn't really developed. People have questions about Jordan Davis. So, these are guys who I still think have an opportunity. But the bandwagon's a lot smaller than it used to be. So that just goes to show, like, you can't just draft from a big school and you're going to have great success. Like, I look at a guy like JJ McCarthy, and I don't believe in him as a quarterback. I don't care that he went to Michigan. Like, I just don't think that that's going to be a situation for success. And, you can't, I get it. Like, you have to take it with a grain of salt when they go to a small school, but you got to look at guys' performances, like in the Senior Bowl, combine performances, when they do play that elevated talent up against them in their schedule. You got to look at each and every one of those opportunities for a guy. And Eric, can I hit the 3 for 3 on things that piss you off?
Oh,
one more thing about Jalen Hooks that I love is he's got that dog in him. He's got that dog in him.
On mute
and for that reason alone, I know he's going to be a player. Eric, you got any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, whatever. No, like, it's really, I don't know, dude, the dog in you. Everybody, how dare you watch a highlight film and go, he's got the dog in him. You want to see? I want to see the low light film with no like editing and see how they react. Well, that would be that's the dog right there. If you just completely like sucked on one play, you just got your bell rung, you got run over, and then the next play you're in the backfield tackling for a loss. That's dog. No,
but do you know what you're doing? You're literally describing the ending to the movie Draft Day.
I like that. It's a very good movie.
When they find the holes in Bo Callahan's game, is they watch Chadwick Boseman sack him, and they watch the next play after each and every time. So it's not a bad strategy, It's it clearly pays off, and it helps you land David Dan Putney, So it's in the end not a bad thing. But we've talked a lot about the linebackers. I think that there's a lot of unknown there.
By the way, just real quick ones about the small school thing again. You want to know who went to Villanova? Brian Westbrook. You want to know who went to Hofstra? Marcus Colston. Marcus Colston has some of the best hands in football, and when he was in New Orleans. Everybody forgets about him, those guys. And some of the guys, and this is not, by the way, this is no shade, because on the Eagles, Jason Avant had some of the best hands, but Jason Avant went to Michigan, and there were guys that I can remember who had a bigger impact than Jason Avant who didn't go to Michigan. So let's just, in the comparison here, the small school, everybody that I just named here, Avant, Colston, really Flacco, Westbrook, all had that dog in them, but they also proved it along the way in their career. It's not even just the quotes and how overused it is. It's just how people say he has that dog in him before they even lace up cleats. At least let's get to week 4. Come
on. Dude, I'm just trying to see week 1, man.
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah. Well, if you have that dog in you, be sure to like and share. Definitely shoot us a like on the channel here, subscribe. Now, if you don't have that dog in you, I would also request that you still like and share and subscribe, because we support dogs and non-dogs. So I don't know if you call that a cat or what you call that, but Eric, whatever you design your people as, just come up with that name and lead your people to the promised land, because we have our home for you here either way.
Bucky Beaver, dude.
Bucky Beaver.
Bucky Beaver. That's what I design myself as.
He's got that puppy.
I identify as an eagle and a Bucky Beaver.
All right, so he's a Beaver Eagle hybrid. Nice. Okay, so we got that going for us. So if you're a fan of the Beagle, the Eagle Beaver hybrid, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Flipping the Birds. But listen, it's not just about the front defensive line. It's not just about the linebackers. There's a lot of questions about the secondary too for Philadelphia, right? So we got issues at corner, we got issues at safety. This is the fantastic part about covering and being a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles after last year, is that there's holes all around. So there's plenty of content to talk about, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So why don't we hit up corner first? unless this is as good a time as any, if there is a good time, let's have the unfortunate conversation of James Bradberry. Where are you at with James? Do you think that there's a path to him? You're already answering, but
I don't know. That's
what do
where
you
I'm
see
at.
this year?
I don't know, because part of me wants to pose this as a question. How much was Bradberry's awful year on the lack of direction or anything from that defense? It's hard for me, and I know the egregious holding call is what everybody remembers, but otherwise, that year from when the Philadelphia Eagles lost in the Super Bowl wasn't bad from Bradberry. It couldn't have been too bad from anybody. You made it to the Super Bowl. So, in my mind, it's egregious to think he's just somehow forgot to play football, and he probably had to learn something completely different or new to his style, and it interfered with it. It's insane to me how your second corner can just fall off the face of the earth to where, and I know it happens often enough, so maybe it's just not crazy to anybody else, but I'm trying to figure out the why here. I would like to see how his, OTAs go, what the reports are about him. If people are outplaying him, then so be it. But I do think it is worth giving him a shot, and kind of just like wiping his slate clean. But he has a short leash. So that's what I will say about him. But as far as James Bradberry is concerned, I'm not necessarily ready to give up on that, because there's not a ton of immediately better options where his depth would be. But
Yeah,
so you kind of got to make a decision. I get that.
I would add the word proven to that. Like, there's not a ton of proven better options, right? So, when you look at James, I actually don't think the Eagles are going to handle the situation too dissimilarly from what you just said. The only spot where I think there's an opportunity for change is, I think part of the reason they're holding on to him is the cap implications if they cut him now versus post June 1st, but they can always designate him as a post June 1st cut. But it just doesn't seem like they're looking to cut him, at least at the moment. I think part of the reason is that, this is going to be kind of like a Sam Bradford situation where they're just going to watch and see what teams lose guys due to injury, because that happens every year. Whether you're going through OTAs, eventually you go through mini camp and training camp, and you lose guys is what happens. So maybe a team misses out on a corner that they felt like they had an opportunity to get. Maybe they lose a guy to injury, whatever the case may be, and then you have an opportunity to gain some future draft capital, or even a player swap and get a guy who fills another need. So. I think that's the main reason Bradberry's, on the roster, and why I expect him to remain on the roster. But if he's on the roster, I think he's going to get a shot to start, because not only are they going to try and showcase, that quote unquote talent, as they're trying to market him and shop him, but on top of that, it's just like you said, that proven talent isn't really there as much. I know Isaiah Rodgers is the guy that everyone wants to talk about possibly putting on the outside there, but dude's a year removed from football. Like, we can't just gloss over that, like, being away from the game for an entire year and then hopping back into it. Like, I don't want to say this early, but like, that also like is a situation that kind of like welcomes injury potentially.
Right.
So I don't want him to go like whole hog, like right off the bat. Like, I need him to kind of work his way gradually back into it. And more than anything, what I want him to be able to do is potentially work that slot should Avonte Maddox get hurt at some point during the year. So the outside, I think, is a little bit of a different situation.
Yeah, I think if the conversation slides directly over to Isaiah Rodgers, it's kind of omitting Eli Ritz and Keely Ringo is just, I don't know. Like, I think that, people just go to the names and they look at last season. Like, I was impressed by those two because I didn't expect much. And then I saw flashes. Then I saw, the first, passes defended, an interception. And to me, I'm thinking to myself, I don't see the finished product yet, but I like what I'm seeing in development. And that's what matters from a rookie. That's what they were. They were brand new last year. And I think people will go, well, can he do it right now? No. Like a lot of rookies can't do it immediately out of the gate. Like it's maybe more so in the NFL than obviously what I normally cover the NHL, but that's, two different horses. The thing here is, if you're going right over to Isaiah Rodgers, I think you said it perfectly. You got to kind of ease him back in. I'm not worried about him. Let him ease back in. Let's see what it is. I'm looking more so at exactly the two that I said. And here's the deal. I'm worried about, not worried, but I'm more focused on James Bradbury way before I'm focused about Isaiah Rodgers. And I know they play opposite sides, but corners are a lot more versatile. So why wouldn't you look at a Josh Jobe for all that? Like, those are the three people excluding Bradbury. So you got Ringo, you got Jobe, and you got Ricks, who are all people that would be, in my eyes, in front of Rodgers because they competed. They competed a lot earlier, a lot more recently, I should say. In my eyes, I just don't think that you should be counting out those younger guys quite yet, because the veterans that you have, A, might be on their way out, and B, they're not necessarily in either. Like there's a weird common ground and gray area, and that gray area is what I'm sinking my teeth into.
Well, so the young guy who you mentioned who kind of stands out, I think, is Keely Ringo. The Eagles clearly like him, and he showed a lot last year. A lot more than a fourth round pick, should be forced to show in his rookie season. So I think that I wouldn't be surprised if they even went to Keely before they went to Kenyon Mitchell. And the only reason why I say that is because, they want to kind of, not necessarily draft and stash, not trying to steal an NBA term, but, you want to, make sure that these guys are ready to take on these positions. And from a talent perspective, I think we all know Kenyon Mitchell is at least projected to be vastly ahead of Keely Ringo, but Ringo showed that he's capable of starting on the outside. The Eagles don't operate, like most fans want their teams to operate. I think the expectation is like, you draft a guy in the first round, he should be starting. That's not the case on every team. Like, and especially if you're a team trying to win, like maybe if you are patching a single hole, you can do something like that. Or maybe if you have a position like running back, that's something that you can do that with. But outside corner is it's just not the same thing there.
And as to your point about the whole draft and stash thing, if you're against, I guess for the lack of a better term, but almost what it seems is, putting your first round guy out there, you kind of feed them to the wolves. You're, sharpening them, iron by fire, whatever, analogy you want to use. I almost would say, let's put Bradbury through the preseason. If he remains healthy and all that, yada, yada, start him as normal, but again, short leash. So you still have Kenyon Mitchell who can just, kind of come in. You could test him out. The next thing you know, that thing, dude, those two should be a constant position battle until you figure out who the definite one is. And then when the definite one will probably be Kenyon Mitchell, because that's your investment. That's how the NFL works. As much as I love or hate it.
I expect him also to prove himself. Like if we're talking about one of these players, like from a talent level. So that's why I hope that it would be Kenyon Mitchell winning that battle, and not just the first round pedigree. And I think that we're on the same boat as far as that goes.
We are.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
It's just along the lines of like, if he does actually go out of his way and prove that, Kenyon Mitchell is the guy, then in Philadelphia, that's when you start trying to figure out, hey, can you get a late pick? Can you get potato chips for this guy, for Bradbury? Because at that point, find a team where somebody has a torn ACL, because honestly, that we might have these answers in the preseason. You might. That's where the opposition battle is going to be. You're going to see your rookies more so than your starters, because if Quinyon Mitchell is projected to be a starter, well, he's still a rookie, so he's going to get more reps. He's going to get more NFL reps to prove himself versus a Bradbury. And if that's going to be a position battle, Bradbury's still going to get more reps because he's got to prove that he has a role here for his worth. It's
I mean, the
going to
only
be a
thing
lot.
is, like, again, if they are planning on potentially moving Bradbury, again, that's the only reason why I see him potentially getting more reps is just to kind of, again, it's that audition of sorts. But we'll see exactly what happens there. We got Jay Fizz checking in. What's up, Jay Fizz? How you doing, man? He says he's late, but wants to know how confident we are in the current pass rushing ability.
Love it.
We talked about guys that we're expecting to see stand up, but what do you think about the totality of the unit? How are you feeling about that heading into OTAs, Eric?
Oh my God, so much more confident, like 1,000 times more confident than last year, because there's a rotation. And there, by the way, not because there's just a rotation, but I have so much more faith in Vic Fangio as a defensive coordinator than Sean Desai or Matt Patricia. Heaven forbid Matt Patricia ever gets a job near Philadelphia, not just Philadelphia, but near Philadelphia. I don't know. I still can't wrap my mind around that. This defense is going to be practically the same defense that you, in theory, in principle, you saw last year, just better. And it has the personnel, by the way, to get it done. That's another trend, by the way, I was saying a little bit last year. They never had the personnel, for the most part, to get it done. But you saw that when Gannon was in town, right? Jonathan Gannon. When you saw when he was in town, you saw that his defense didn't really work. And then when he had the personnel carried his scheme. I think you have the person who's going to be able to implement his scheme, not a disciple who thinks he might understand the scheme. You have the person who's going to implement his scheme with a better personnel. That screams to me that whatever your expectation was last year, this is above it.
Yeah, maybe I'm not as confident as you.
I'm hyped.
We'll say. Like, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what Bryce Huff can do. I'm excited to see Nolan Smith healthy in more of a featured role. I'm excited for year 2 with Jalen Carter. Like, there are a lot of reasons that I am excited. But what I will say is that I am a bit hesitant just to wave the rah flag and all that, just because like losing Hassan Reddick does hurt. I'm not mad at the trade. I wish it was like a more present tense asset that you got in return instead of a second rounder 2 years out. But even still, given the market, a second rounder for a pass rusher was not bad, all things considered. And I don't think the Jets are going to be that good that year either. So I think it'll be a decent pick. But overall, how I feel about it, I think it's going to be a solid unit. I think we're looking at a solid squad, as when you look at who they're led by, Vic Fangio. There's coaches who, and this is, I think, pretty true across sports. There's coaches who can elevate a team. There's coaches who, and that's their scheme, that's their ability, all of that. There's coaches who can make quality players great, right? And then there's coaches who have a great scheme that need those great players, right, in order for it to even be functional. And I think Vic Fangio is that kind of second tier, that middle category where it's a great scheme that can be elevated with great players, right? So you don't necessarily need the best players. Like you are actually able to truly find success. You're not just dependent on having great players. I felt like Jonathan Gannon was dependent on having great players. You obviously need good players to have a good defense in the NFL, but I think Vic Fangio has that combination where he can elevate guys, but then also help guys transcend that good to great defensive mold. So I'm excited
quick,
to see.
Can you highlight what Ron Kay said over there? On the I love that point there, how Fangio said that he hopes this is his last stop as a football coach. That probably that makes total sense when you consider where he started his coaching career, Philadelphia Stars, and then wanting to be a DC here. Look, he has a philosophy, and his philosophy, even in Denver, was bend don't break. And that's going to be a heavy reliance on the secondary. And I think the secondary, this draft is no accident. Okay. We've addressed that. Now, the only part about that I'm a little bit concerned about is linebacker coverage and pass coverage. Besides that, I think this team is going to be all over pressuring quarterbacks and the run game. Those are things that I'm almost a certainty about. When you look at the just look at the front here. We have Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Bryce Huff, Nakobe Dean, and Nakobe Dean is a guy that maybe Nakobe Dean, between him and Jeremiah Trotter, they're downhill tacklers and downhill players, but it may be they're probably the best coverage linebackers we have. I think Devin White is a step slow, but you have Josh Sweat. Then in the backgrounds, guys that will rotate in other words, you have Nolan Smith, you have Brendan Graham, and you got Marlon Tuipulotu. We haven't even mentioned Moro Ojomo yet. And that's a guy that, dude, no one's talked about. He's raw as all hell. I like him.
I do like Ojomo too. Yeah, I think he'll be a nice rotation piece. Well, we're kind of coming up against it, but I do want to talk about the safeties just real quick. So obviously the Eagles brought back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Sidney Brown is coming off of a major injury, but it looks like he's going to be ready to go come the start of the new year. Reed Blankenship's back for another year. Cooper DeJean may see some time at safety. How are you feeling about this safety group heading into OTAs?
I always liked what I saw out of Reed Blankenship, and Morgan will dub him White Lightning, and it was fantastic. And when he did that, but he's spot on. I mean, the guy was in on pretty much everything. He has a nose for the ball. He has a nose for the tackle. He's one of the most short tacklers on the team, and that's probably why, he ran himself into the ground last year, and he kind of got banged up for it. But that's what you need to do at that position. Now, Charlie, CJ Gardner-Johnson, whatever. To me, if he can maintain what he was before when he was in Philadelphia, that's the big question I have. I want to go ahead and just say, yay, we got him back. Like, he was phenomenal. But I'm careful with those words because the secondary is the whole. I don't have the same confidence. I'm not conditioned to have the same confidence in the secondary as I am with the defensive line when we talk Philadelphia football. And it's wild because for a long time, the safeties, when we had Jenkins, we had, going back to the days of Bobby Taylor and Dawkins, like that was our bread and butter for a long time. But we'll see. I would love for him to come back with the same angst and the same focus. And if he does that, dude, we're talking about a safety group that's both underrated, but like vicious at the same time. Yeah, Ron, I do think that DeJean is going to start, but I don't, that'll be as a nickel. So I don't know if he's going to, outside, I think I've heard from people, but in this depth chart that I'm looking at right now, he's listed as a nickel right in front of Avonte Maddox. But let's talk about real quick, Mekhi Gardner. I'm going to actually pivot him to you because
Wait, hold on.
Because Sidney Brown is somebody that I really like. We have depth. We have depth in places. Like, that's what I'm excited about. And I think Sidney Brown last year, obviously, Brand pretty much knew enough. He got burnt at times, and that's going to happen. But I think it was all such a learning experience. But if you put him back on the field this year, you're going to see a different Sidney Brown, someone who's smarter and someone who knows how to kind of cut the field off. And that's what I'm excited for. I'm excited for the fact that if one goes down, God forbid, one steps up, and we're not worried about the one who steps up.
Well, we have three safeties, so let's hope that nobody goes down. But I do agree that the talent is definitely there. Sidney Brown is someone who I think is going to come back better than ever, like you said. I love what I've seen from Reed Blankenship, and I think that in kind of like a three-man rotation, very interesting to see. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I think he's going to still have that angst and that personality.
Good. Oh, he does have that angst and personality. I just wanted to.
I don't know the level of play is going to still be the same. Is my thing. So, we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
You said that a lot more concise than I did because that was the whole point I was getting at as well.
Well, we'll see how it goes. But again, we're man, I'm just so excited. I'm excited for Eagles football. I've put the black cloud of Sixers basketball behind me. I'm enjoying the best team in baseball, the Philadelphia Phillies, and Flyers draft is coming up, and I don't feel too bad about that either. So it's a good time, but I need some Eagles football. So thank you so much.
I will say this just before we get off the air, it does look like Cooper will be the kick returner, punt returner. That as far as talking about defensive players, he's going to be. He's like a 5-tool player. If that's not the most overused thing, like dog, then sue me. But like Cooper is somebody who he was going to be the best defensive back in class. It seemed like, and the fact that we hardly had to do any work to get the person at corner that everybody was starting to drool over, and Quinyon Mitchell, and then we got Cooper, who Cooper can pretty much do 4 or 5 positions on this team as a rookie. If you're not salivating about Philadelphia Eagles football this season, I don't know what to say to you. And this is just the defense. Go back to last week when we talked about the offense.
Yeah. No, I love it.
Special teams too, as well.
Absolutely. Great. A lot to be excited about going forward. A lot of Flipping the Birds content over the summer to be excited about as well. So be sure to tune in. I know we have another show. I think it's later this week. I think we're doing a Thursday show with Morgan and Brian. So definitely be sure. And listen, salivating dogs, they're hungry. That's the one thing that we know about salivating dogs, man.
Salivating dogs salivate faster, dude. That's or something like that.
Exactly. Exactly. They know how to fertilize flowers, those salivating dogs. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. It's been myself, Zach Shalala, here with Eric Reese, handling the business today on Flipping the Birds.
With that being said, take care and forever go Birds.
Hell yeah.
You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
Touchdown! A.J. Brown! That's beautiful. And intercepted by the Eagles. He is hit. They got him again! They got him back at the 26. He's into the end zone.